good evening. Welcome to Better Together, sharing our lupus stories. I'm Chanel Gabriel, and we are all the way live. We're going to be here talking about lupus. So we're here, as always, to empower people living with lupus to live their best lives, whatever that may look like. And so we have a resource-filled show today, and I have to welcome in my co-host, Dr. Michaela Bayard, aka the Lupus Doc. How are you, my dear?
I'm great, Chanel. How are you?
I'm good. Happy November, and it's the election night. Did you get a chance to go vote?
I did. I have my sticker somewhere over here. Yep. Yay. So, did you get to avoid the crowds or what happened?
Oh yeah, no, I made sure I did early voting because I wasn't trying to be there. But I'm hearing that a lot of people did early voting, so it's probably not as crazy as we can imagine it be. And this is really an intense election.
It is.
You know.
I mean, I've seen a lot of people coming in on my clinic today who had their voting stickers on. And, it's funny because I think that we don't really think about voting as a health behavior, but it is, diet, exercise, healthy living, all these things impact your space, your community, your environment. So I just think it's so important when you think about being a healthy individual that voting is a part of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And with all the conversations around limitations and new guidelines around who can vote, in general, for anyone that says maybe my vote doesn't count, I always say, think about it this way. If it wasn't important, people would not be limiting access to it. So you have a couple more hours. We won't feel bad if you leave your computer and watch us on your phone on the way to the polls, okay? So, but glad to be here and glad you all are joining us to have this great show. This is going to be a good show.
And I love your festive jewelry, Chanel.
I did it. I did my little flag.
Well, I'm so excited for tonight's topic. We're going to be talking about managing the cost of lupus.
Yeah.
We know that, costs hit hard, especially patients' pockets. And there are other ways things can cost. And, it's really such a full spectrum way that costs impact people who have chronic disease. So our guests are going to help us explore how we talk about this, start to think about how we navigate getting the support we need when we think about the costs of healthcare.
Yep. And our first guest tonight is Sharifa Jefferson Key, who is the mother of two daughters, has 26 years as a dedicated medical professional. And after 10 years of battling lupus, she founded Lupus Together, New Jersey, an organization to support and empower others. And we have another Loopy who loves to travel internationally as well as eat great food. Me too, girl. I'm going to eat, on a trip.
Me too.
So I can't wait to talk to Sharifa.
We also have Charisse Gabriel, who serves as a manager of regulatory complaints, handling provider and member complaints from agencies such as the Department of Insurance, Department of Health, and the Attorney General. And she's been working for over 27 years in the insurance industry, working to ensure all parties are doing what they are supposed to so patients really get access to quality care.
Yes. So excited to talk with her. And last but certainly not least, we have someone who is no stranger to Better Together, maybe to you all, but we have Savine DaCosta. She is the executive producer of this amazing show that you've been watching for 3 seasons. She's usually behind the scenes, but we are helping make sure that this show happens each season. But today we have her in front of the camera. And so we're really, really excited to have her.
So excited for that. I mean, there's so much about her we can share. She is also a caregiver, a patient herself who understands firsthand really all the challenges that patients with chronic conditions can face. Savine has dedicated her life's work to educating and empowering patients and caregivers so they can advocate for better education and health. And she and all of our guests today have really just a wealth of knowledge. So I'm really excited to just dig in today, Chanel.
Yes. And I have to make sure all of you viewers know you can join us too. Send us your questions, your comments in the chat, engage with us and each other. I see a few people. Sherry voted earlier. Sherry voted earlier. Bridget said, good evening. Keep talking to us. We're here and we're listening. As long as you know that you are here, we're going to get started. And now, if you can, feel free to put some purple hearts in the chat as we meet our first guest. Please welcome to the virtual stage, Sharifa Jefferson Key.
Good evening. Good
Hi.
evening. Good evening. Good evening. Hi, how are you?
Great. Welcome. We're so happy to have you tonight. Love your energy. So first off, we saw on your Instagram page that we should be addressing you as Madam Vice President of the Bordentown Rotary Club. So congrats.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so very much.
I
Such
know
an honor.
Kamala's busy, so we got another VP in the house. That was what happened.
I like that, Chanel. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sherry, for all those hearts. We got hearts in the chat. So, Sharifa, yeah, we're so excited to hear from you. Please tell us your lupus story.
So my lupus story started, I was diagnosed 12 years ago with systematic, which we know as SLE, lupus, after having a few years prior battle of starting with symptoms as normal people sometimes get: fatigue. I started having headaches, joint and muscle pain. So I actually started off by going to my GP, which is my internist, started complaining about the symptoms that I was having. At the time, I was probably working 50 to 60 hours a week. I was a mother of 2 younger children, married, a wife. So at that time, my doctor told me that I was just a busy woman doing a lot and that I just needed to slow down. But as we know, we're career women, a lot of us are. Slowing down is not in our DNA. So I continued to work, but I continued to have the symptoms. I am one of those people are pretty much in tune with my body. So I knew it was out of the norm for me. I started to get worse. And 2 years later, I finally went to a different internist and expressed my pain. I was to the point where I could not barely touch my own skin. I never had a malar rash, but she said to me, something is wrong and we're going to get to the bottom of it. She then sent me to a rheumatologist because my ANA came back abnormal. My SED rate came back abnormal. Some other markers on my blood work came back abnormal. I didn't proceed to go to the rheumatologist at that time. And he actually told me, his demeanor in front of my husband at that time was, it's all in your head. It's psychological. Let me put you on some antidepressants. You're a busy mom, and let's check back in with you in 3 months. Take this medication. Obviously, I was not satisfied with that answer because I knew something physically was wrong. I then went to a different rheumatologist because I'm in the medical field. I have a little bit more access to knowing more doctors, and my ballpark is a little bit different. So I went to a different rheumatologist, and lo and behold, I found out that I had lupus in March of 2012. I actually sat outside of the doctor's office on that day in my car and cried because I not only got a diagnosis that I knew probably was there, but I was also relieved to have a diagnosis so that I can start some type of treatment. And that I did know that it was not only in my head, that it was a physical thing that was going on.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Sharifa. I mean, I think it's powerful to hear that you were able to advocate for yourself and find providers who are really able to hear you. And it sounds like that made all the difference. Today we're talking a lot about costs. And, can you speak a little bit on maybe how lupus may have cost you mentally or even socially?
So for me, it has cost me on different levels in my life. One of the more important is I'm out on disability right now. So I am like I said previously, I'm a person that works a lot. And for my doctor to say to me, wait, Sharifa, your numbers are off. Your body is aching. You need to slow it down. You really need to listen to your body and slow it down. And since you won't do it, I'm putting you out of work. So that took me for a loop because again, I am a person that likes to work. And I like to be involved. So another aspect of it is cost of going to the doctors. I do chemo every 3 weeks. I do, I'm a chronic migraine sufferer. So I also do infusions for migraines. That's every 3 months. I do a monthly injection for migraines as well. And I take 27 pills a day, including one being steroids, prednisone, hydrochloroquine.
We don't need to talk about the meds. It's okay.
Oh, is that?
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about specifics. It's okay.
Yeah,
oh, okay. I'm sorry.
But that's a lot. That's a lot. Like to have to take all these different medications and to go from, somebody that is living a vivacious life and doing all of these amazing things to having to slow down, like the cost that has for your own personal, like, let's be real, like our own egos and our own like ambitions and drive. That's really challenging. I know for myself that was probably the hardest thing was, changing. I had to change careers at one point in time because I was like, I need good healthcare. So I definitely can empathize and understand like how like having to change and shift your whole life is a cost. And Cherie mentioned like talking about that time spent at various follow-up appointments is another cost. I mean, I wonder if that's, that's something you've had to think about,
Yes. So I do spend a lot of time at doctor's offices. I can see doctors 3 times a week. I can see doctors. Sometimes I've seen multiple doctors in a day, which again, when you're out of work or on this, you have less income. So, gas prices, co-pays, all of that stuff adds up. Medications, I can spend anywhere from $500 in co-pays for medication all the way up, if you haven't met your deductible, in the thousands for medications. And not to mention, even with the medications, the weight gain, the different mental, you go through sometimes anxiety. You go through sometimes, you do get depressed sometimes. You get in a space where you don't feel well, so you don't want to be bothered with people. So it affects you socially. Sometimes you have to cancel plans that you want to go with because, as we know with lupus, things can go to the left really quickly. And you have to just shift and come to the point of being okay with not being okay.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, we kind of wanted to hear a little bit about how you feel your life, because you're sharing this cost that it really has on you, but like emotionally, how do you feel your life?
So I have a new baby and a new passion that I started. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. I started Lupus Together, nonprofit organization, so that I, as well as people that join me, can advocate for people like ourselves, raise awareness for people like ourselves. Because again, we all know that lupus and autoimmune diseases are invisible. So people don't get it. We look fine. We have on our lipstick. We are dressed up. We go to work and we don't feel well. So my job, so I have fulfilled like I said, my passion with now starting the Lupus Together, and it's been very successful. I have an in-person support meetings monthly. I have virtual Zoom support meetings virtually once a month. We do a lot of things that we give back to the community. We just had what's called a fund drive where we raised monies we were cleaning out our closets, cleaning out our cabinets, and all those things went to a local thrift shop where it will be given back to the community, within the community. So we do that. I done a scholarship brunch where we gave a $1,200 scholarship to a high school student that has lupus, and that was going on to secondary schooling.
That's
So
great.
I'm keeping myself very busy with that, which is a good thing because it keeps me busy. It keeps me with a purpose, with my passion, and also giving back to my own community.
That's beautiful.
Thank you, Sharifa. Thank you for sharing your story and your work. Viewers, feel free to check out more at www.lupustogether.nj.org to learn more about ways to join and connect.
Yeah, thank you
You
so
ladies
much.
so very much.
No, you're doing great work, and it's so important to have spaces and to be able to pour into the things that we care about, and our stories, our experiences, give testimonies that other people really need to hear. So, just wanting to say thank you so much for that. Yeah. So next up, we're going to discuss some of the real ways we can get support as we navigate our medical needs. I'm going to pass it on. Dr. Miki, would you like to introduce the next guest?
Yes. Let's welcome Sharice Gabriel to the conversation.
Yay, put some hearts in the chat.
Hello,
Welcome, Sharice. So you and Chanel having the same last name is not a coincidence, is it?
No, that's my little cousin.
Yes. And she likes to make me call her my favorite cousin. Sorry.
Yes. And the favorite cousin. Sorry, I forgot about that most important part.
That she's my favorite cousin. I have to say, Kiona, don't get mad at me, my other cousin, but they fight for my love and affection. But no, seriously, just thank you for being here. Sharice has been doing some really great work for so long and has just so much knowledge. It felt so natural to bring her into this conversation. And Sharice, I think people don't always know how this stuff works. Like we see a doctor and that's the thing that we most are caring about. But traditionally, when we talk about like insurance versus hospitals, how do things get paid for when you have insurance? And do they bill patients first? Do they prefer certain insurances more? And can that sometimes impact care?
So I'm going to keep it real and give this disclaimer. Most providers do not like to take Medicaid patients, unfortunately, only because they get paid at a lower rate. But they will get payment. That's one guaranteed payment that will go through. Mm-hmm. Providers normally go through hospitals. The providers in hospitals normally bill their insurance directly. They should not, I repeat, they should not bill a patient. You should not give any money out of pocket unless it's your co-payment upfront to any provider's office. When they ask you to remit payment and say that you'll get reimbursed after they submit the claim, do not do that because it's a long process and they should not be doing that, especially hospitals and providers that have a contract with health insurance plans. They are not supposed to do that at all. So I always strongly urge my friends, my family members, do not pay anything out of pocket to a provider
until after it goes through insurance and you're able to see everything.
Correct. Because what should happen prior to the service, the provider or the hospital should be contacting your insurance plan, making sure they get an authorization, making sure that they're even participating with your plan that you have, and they iron all that information up front. So when you come to the doctor's office, it should just be you hand over your card, and if you have a co-payment, you make the co-payment and you're seen. They'll bill the insurance. If they have any issues, that's where they would normally come to what I do, which is process a denied claim if they received the claim was denied for whatever reason it may have denied by the carrier.
Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up.
Not a problem. That's the biggest one-on-one I always tell all patients.
So one thing, as a provider, I hear is, sometimes people get a hospital bill they didn't expect or they can't afford. What are your thoughts about that?
So normally for especially hospitals, most hospitals have a contracted rate with the insurance carriers. So you may see that I just saw one patient. They had it was a heart surgery. That was $150,000 that they just billed, but they end up getting paid a very lower part. So on the member side, you really should not be worried unless you have, um, as Sharifa said, where she has deductibles, where you have to meet your certain deductibles first. But if you are covered under a HMO plan, you should not be concerned about having to pay anything out of pocket except for your copayment. Anything else should be directed back to the health insurance plan. Always make sure you contact them, speak to customer service. If you find, unfortunately, sometimes the health insurance plan may not give you what you need, and then that's when you can go. There's other agencies, the Department of Health, Department of Financial Services, the Attorney General's office. For older patients, there's for Medicare patients, there's CMS. These are all advocates on behalf of patients, as well as providers, but they really do go forward to help patients to make sure that their services are covered and they don't pay anything out of pocket that they're not supposed to.
Thank you.
I have one quick question. So if, like, say where they do present me with a bill, I don't have insurance, 'cause I know there's a lot of people that go, oh, I don't have insurance, I'm not going to the doctor. Is that a real fear, or like, will hospitals turn them away, or like, you know?
It is. When you go to the hospital, if you go to the emergency room, they cannot turn you away. What they do ask is they ask for your personal information. They try to connect you with a social worker, and then they try to set you up to see if you can get Medicaid. If you're not eligible for Medicaid, then they try to work out a payment plan for you to end up paying your bill. But the first option is they do try to get you some type of health insurance. They work with you to see what plans they could find for you.
That's good too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. So people joke also, I'm sorry, I had this one other question. People joke about writing letters. It's like, you know, like I'm so mad, I'm going to write a letter. But is that actually effective?
Yes, it is, because I do it. Even with my own, insurance at times, if I know that something is not correct and you do try to go to customer service, again, I would tell them to end up going to one of the state regulators, the Attorney General, to one of those agencies, write a letter, send a complaint. They have to respond, because sometimes they say they write the letter to the insurance and they don't get anything. So that's why then I tell them to try and write the letters to those state agencies, because they are required by state law to respond back to insurance carriers. And there are certain time frames where they have to respond back. So a lot of times I will say providers use that avenue because they know they're going to get the answer. It's going to come back in a faster turnaround, and it's going to be an accurate answer, because the state will go back to you on more than one occasion if they are not satisfied with the response that the health plans are giving.
All right,
So
everybody.
Works.
Sharice, this is also helpful. Do you have any final advice for people trying to navigate the cost of healthcare?
Always make sure to check your benefits with your health insurance plan. Call them first. That's what they're there for. And a lot of the times they could send you back the information. They could send you your handbook, which should be a briefer version of your contract with the health plan. And this will show you you have a co-payment of $15. You go to the hospital, you're there, it may be $250 for emergency room, and then admitted is $500. So always make sure to check with your health insurance plan if a provider is covered, and do not pay upfront. Please do not pay upfront, because that's when you have a problem. Those are my 2 takeaways.
Thank you. Thank you, cousin. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
And I am.
And I'm sure there's so much you could cover in this, but we're going to come back to both you and Sharifa a little later and get you all in this conversation. But thank you so much. And right now, I'm very excited to bring in the person who helped make Better Together Sharing Our Lupus Stories happen. welcome to the virtual stage our executive producer, Savine DaCosta.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Sabine. We're so excited
Thank
to
you
have
for
our
having
viewers
me.
meet you. So thank you so much for your dedication to the equity work you do for patients and really the care have been doing for people throughout your career.
I'm so excited to be here. And quite honestly, I want Charisse to adopt me as her cousin. Because if I had her earlier in my journey, oh my gosh, everything would have just been so much easier. So I'm stealing her from you, Chanel. You can't have her anymore. I'm stealing her.
Now, we don't just have you on the show because you're the boss, but you have so much experience navigating tonight's topic, actually as a patient and as a caregiver. So can you tell us a little bit about your own journey as a caregiver and as a patient?
Sure. I'll start really quickly just to piggyback off of something that Charisse said about don't pay up front. It's a very real thing out there because I have been suffering for over 40 years with chronic migraines. And I just recently had an experience where my doctor's office has instituted a plan where you pay for your medication up front, which is over $1,200. And then they want you to submit for reimbursement through some online service. So knowing what Cherise said, I was like, oh no, I have insurance. And I called the insurance provider and spoke to my son's case manager. And they investigated and said, no, they are in network. So that's another term, in network versus out of network. And they should not be doing that. And so now it's like, I have a note in my chart. Don't charge her, only her copay. So just so another example of what she's saying is very, very real and it could happen and you could be approached with that. But so like I said, I am a chronic migraine sufferer and it ebbs and flows like it was talked about earlier. And so much so that I've actually even had a stroke. So it's a very real thing for me and it's a very serious thing for me. And it can go out of control very easily. And it impacts everything that I do, even my caregiving for my son, who was born at 1.5 pounds at 27 weeks because of another medical condition that I had. And he's 23 now, and that's us celebrating his 23rd birthday. So he has cerebral palsy and he's nonverbal and in a wheelchair. So he is who my husband and I care for all the time. So that's my husband, myself, and I at an event that is called Night to Shine, which is a disability prom that happens every year from anyone from young age all the way up to 95. It's an opportunity where they get to go to a prom and enjoy themselves and party hardy all night long. So yeah, my son's journey has been one that has been fraught with chronic illnesses and multiple disabilities, but he's amazing and he thrives and we enjoy life, but it's taken us on a serious medical journey.
Yeah.
And I mean, imagine it, I imagine that managing this can cost a lot. You're having both your own health and others. And while this is Better Together, sharing our lupus stories, in conversation with you, your experiences really, really mirror a lot of things that we deal with. So your wisdom on this, how did you, because I'm sure what you know is going to help the rest of us. How have you navigating paying for all of this, the co-pays, and I imagine he needs, and some, people with lupus need medical devices as well. How have you managed that?
Yeah. Ironically, my son being deemed disabled is fortunate enough to have 2 insurances. So he has private insurance, which is through my husband and I for work, but he also has state insurance, which is Medicaid. So you would think that that's a wonderful thing, and it is, but we then have to manage both, and we have to understand who's the first payer, who's the second payer. So in most instances, we do not have to pay a deductible, but early on, one hospitalization for him was $23,000.
Wow.
And if the background of what happens at the hospital is not correct, we can receive one of those bills. And then we have to go through the process of making sure that all of his numbers are correct, everything's right to get it paid, because if not, then that can go to claims. And then that can go to us then showing up on one of those lists that we are now getting on a creditor's list. And so we have to be very careful about everybody along the step of the way doing everything correctly. So that's one aspect of it. He's in a wheelchair. Wheelchairs can cost upwards of $18,000. So, you have to see what one payer is going to pay for or deny, and then what the other payer is going to pick up. And so there's this jockeying, and then what's left for you to pay for. So there's always that. But then there are things that they refuse to pay for altogether. For example, he requires nursing. Private says that that's custodial to a certain point. Like now he's over 21, private won't pay for nursing. Now he's on the waiver system. So there's a whole lot that goes into this. So no insurer is paying for his nursing at this point because he's on a waiver program. But diapers, he's on an overnight feed. So private considers that custodial, meaning you, the parent, you take care of that. Mm-hmm. So then you have to question, will secondary pick it up, or is that an out-of-pocket expense? So what I always do is I first look at what his diagnoses are, and then say, is this, like Cherie said, look at what your benefits are, and are you covered? Because then I can fight it and say, no, you're supposed to pay for it. But if I don't understand what I'm eligible for, then I don't know what to fight for. So that's step one, understanding what you're eligible for, understanding what your diagnosis is. And if you don't have a diagnosis, that's important too, because you could have many things going on with you, and one of them could be a diagnosis. And then understanding what is fundable outside of insurance. So talk to social work, because there's all of these charitable organizations that are funding things. And then what is the funding cycle? Because you could apply for something and there's no money. And then 3 months or 6 months, there is money to try again. So I try everything possible, and I talk to everybody that I can to figure out, what are we eligible for? What's available? Because of my income, I may not be eligible for a lot of things. And you also have to know what's available to you in your state, because some states, he's eligible for things because he's disabled, and it's not based on our income. Some states is based on your income. Some states have a discretionary fund for people with disabilities. Some states don't. So each state, it depends on what they're offering you. So you have to become very knowledgeable. I have a notebook, lessons learned, people I speak to that are very smart. What's your name? What's your number? If you don't know anything, I also have a page. They don't know anything. So if I get them again, they're not going to help me. One thing that I also do is they always say these calls are being recorded. So if I run up against difficult situations, I always say, was this call recorded? Can I speak to your manager? Because we need to listen to this recording again, because you're not being very helpful in a very nice, polite way. So every next
you just gave so much stuff. I have to pause you real quick, because
you positive.
You have so much good stuff that you've given in that I have to give you a moment, because I want to go back to a couple of things you said that I really would love you to expound upon. So one thing you said, you have to know your diagnoses. Can you explain that, and how knowing those diagnoses has worked in that sense, really breaking that down?
I'll give you an example. For my son, when he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, that's the diagnosis they put. My son has cerebral palsy. He has asthma. He has musculoskeletal scoliosis. He has acid reflux. He's nonverbal. He's in a wheelchair. That was just 6. I can list 10 more. None of those was listed. They just went straight to cerebral palsy. So when I asked them to list all of his diagnoses, and that was the one, I sat down and said, this is not going to work for me. I need him to basically look as bad in your computer system as he is. And everybody thought I had 2 heads, because most of the times we don't want to be labeled. But for me, it wasn't about him being labeled. It was about when I asked for something and the insurance company saw all of this, it wasn't a fight for me to get what he needed. So for someone that has lupus, there are a lot of other things that are happening with their body that may carry a diagnosis code that should be listed in their chart, so that if they need a different type of a medication, maybe it won't require a prior authorization, or maybe it won't require a letter of medical necessity because it's already listed in their chart. So I would advise people to say, what do you have listed for me as a diagnosis? And go down each and everything that they know they have and have it put in their chart, because it may help them when it comes to something that they may need. If they may ultimately need a walker for a time when they're in a flare, it's now listed because there's a need for it in there. So things like that may help them. It may help them get medical assistance because now it's already proven, and now they don't have to fight in the time when it's needed because it's already been established. So just different things like that I've learned along the way, and then check it again in 6 months to make sure it didn't disappear.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You are so obviously an amazing caretaker, but I think, what our viewers can take out of this is just how important knowing your resources is and how to continue to tap into those. As you go about this as a caretaker, what kind of advice do you have for someone who's doing this alone and is trying to juggle this and dealing with an illness?
I would say always keep a notebook around or some form of taking notes, because you're never going to remember. And I would say don't get frustrated. It's a marathon, because you think you're a subject matter expert this month, and then in 3 months, something shifts. I always say my son and my condition, they don't change. The system changes. The questions that they ask change. And we have to learn how to answer the appropriate questions to get what we need to be our best selves. And so I'm learning every day how to not be frustrated and how to continue to answer the questions in the best way possible to get what we need. And then how to educate my providers to do that also, because they don't understand what we need and the best way to get it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point you bring up. Partnering needs to happen with the providers. And in a lot of ways, sometimes we are learning how to get what our patients need best. And so it really is partnering with the caregivers and the patients to learn that.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
And
I take 4 things into my doctor's office. I just take 4 things to my doctor's office. I take all of my prescriptions and when I need refills, even though there are apps for it. What if my phone's not working? I usually take just a paper copy of that. I take what happened in all my last visits with my specialist, when I went and what happened. I also take a list of all of his surgeries and his procedures and last hospitalizations. Just carte blanche, because I never know what's going to happen. I never want to have to wait until the specialist sends a letter to the other doctor for that communication to happen. I consider myself his continuity of care. And so I keep that conversation going everywhere I go. And so that way they can never say it didn't happen. And then I can walk out of there with what I need. I don't have to wait 2 weeks to say, well, did you guys talk to each other? I have to follow up. I make that my time to get what I need while I'm there, because I don't know if I call back, I'm going to get the doctor.
That's important. And that's always the challenge, like working well with one person and things change. And somebody in the chat and on Facebook, it's really, really very lively chat. And we have a main person that's giving some really good advice. And talking about the idea of really keeping a notebook and keeping things down and keeping in mind that each state is different with their health coverage and that sometimes things change.
Absolutely.
And having to always learn. So I imagine even as much of a pro as you might be at this, it definitely is continued learning and growing. And we thank you so much for sharing that.
You're definitely. And when I say notebook, that could be virtual. It could be any way that you're comfortable in keeping those key learnings for you.
Thank you. Definitely. So I just want to say thank you for sharing your insights, Savine, and also congrats on all of Gabe's continued progress in all the different areas of his health. And now we're just going to welcome everybody back to share one quick, time is limited. So we have one quick final thought. If you could bring Sharifa, bring back Sharice, just talking about like, what is your final thought, like on a way to manage, whether it be also emotionally, once again, the cost of lupus, or just in general, navigating the financial cost of having a chronic illness. Anyone like to start? Can I start with you, Sharifa? Because we haven't heard from you in a while.
That's no problem. Hi, everybody. And you guys have so many good bullet points and so much meat that you guys gave us today. So I thank you for that. My final thought is really one for the lupus warriors. And to piggyback off of Savine, please be an advocate for yourself. Advocate for yourself. I'm a big person on writing things down, just as she said as well. I tell people to use your phones. That's the biggest tool you have, is your smartphone. Write down symptoms, write down when you had the symptoms, what you were doing when you had the symptoms, so that when you go into the doctor's office, we all can remember and like she said, be on the same page, because you'll get out of the doctor's office and you'll say, oh, I forgot that I had this last week or whatever. My other final thought is for the loved ones, the friends, and the caregivers of people that have someone in their lives that have lupus, is to learn, if you don't already know, to have empathy. Empathy for just obviously learning about the illness, educating yourself about the illness, and just being empathetic to the changes that may happen from moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day, month to month. And just to listen to the person that has the illness, whether it be a migraine, whether it be lupus, whether it be any other autoimmune disease that can happen. And just invest in yourself. Do things that make you happy, because lupus does come at a cost. I am an advocate. I am a chronic traveler. But I know when I go traveling international or wherever I go, if I'm away for a week, I have to give myself 4 days post vacation to recover from that vacation. But I know the cost of the travel. So I know that it gives me a peace of mind. It gives me time to recharge. It gives me time to feed into myself. Mm-hmm. But I know on the back end of it, I have to give myself another 3 or 4 days to recover from whatever it is that I am doing to make myself happy, make myself, feel refreshed. Again, and pour into myself and love on myself, basically.
That's beautiful. No, thank you for bringing that in, making sure that you pour the good things in and make sure that you have the emotional support and help others learn how to support you as well. I think, and all caregivers listening, that support is helpful. Sharice, a quick thought, and then we'll close out with Savine. Sharice.
Well, Savine, you don't need me. You are a very good advocate. And one thing I did forget, which she did say, is do make sure you take notes. When you do call the insurance carrier or when you call the provider's office, make sure you take down their name. And they should be giving you their full name, not just say they want to give their initial or something. Make sure they take their name. Make sure you do not pay for anything. And as Sharifa did say, if you are not satisfied with that doctor, it's within your health plan that you can get a second opinion. So no matter what the issue is, you are entitled to a second opinion. They need to give you another name. If there's not one that's not near you, sometimes they can make an arrangement for you to see one that's not with the plan, but they will always try to get you one within the plan, but just always make sure you document and do not pay. That's my final thought. Do not pay for anything.
Do not pay for anything, and document everything, and you have the power to change your plan. Savine, close this out real quick.
This journey is a marathon. And like with a marathon, you have to train. You're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. But at the end of it, you see success in what you do by getting something covered, by getting something reduced, by feeling good, by going on a trip, and by giving yourself grace. But understand that it is not a sprint, it is a marathon.
Mm. Yes.
Love it.
Beautiful. This has been such an extremely informative conversation. I think that for me listening, I think there's so much that we as providers, sometimes forget is happening, outside of the office, and, even getting to the office, finding someone who finally, is within your plan. So I think that, communicating that and having your provider partner in that and saying, hey, I really did a lot to be here, and I'm trying to understand the whole process of, how I continue to get all the care I need is really important.
No, definitely, definitely. This was great. I feel so overwhelmed, and you have so many comments. And Cherie has been on Facebook has been really like affirming everything that you all are saying, and thank you so much. This has been great, right, Dr. Michaela?
Yes, we're having a great conversation. I just want to thank you, Sabine. Thanks, Sharifa, for your time and knowledge. I'm sure our friends are watching. They got a lot of insight to move forward with, and we're just excited.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Yes,
Y'all.
thank you.
Thank you. I learned so much, and the learning does not stop. It is actually time for another very knowledgeable learning segment, a special segment here on Better Together called Spotlight on Research. Now, this segment invites guests from research sites from around the country to better explain the journey that leads to new treatments, so we can fully understand the clinical trial process, the facts, the myths, and how we can be involved.
Yes, and because she did such an amazing job on the last show, we have Dr. Megan Lockwood returning here with us. So welcome back, Dr. Lockwood.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So let's get right into this topic because there are so many misconceptions about this process. We know there are different phases where different things happen. And we really want to know, why is there a need for these different phases in clinical trials, and who regulates all the requirements for this process?
It's a great question, and it gets complicated quickly. At a basic level, clinical trials are conducted in a series of steps called phases, and each phase has a different purpose that helps researchers to answer different questions. And this is very closely regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. Most clinical trials are also approved and monitored by an institutional review board, or an IRB, which is a term you should hear a lot. And the IRB's job is to ensure that the risks are minimal when compared with any potential benefits. And the IRB is an independent committee that consists of physicians, statisticians, and members of the community who are there to ensure that the clinical trials are ethical and that the rights of the patients are being protected.
That's so helpful. Okay, got it now. That's helpful. So now break it down just a little bit more and describe. Okay, might be a big job. Each of the phases, just briefly, like what are they one by one?
Totally. So in general, I think about clinical trials as having 4 phases or 4 parts. And each phase studies the potential treatment or medication in more people. And what's really important to know is that if the medicine doesn't work or isn't safe in a certain phase, it cannot go on to the next phase. Mm-hmm. So in phase 1, the researchers are testing a drug or a treatment in a small group of healthy people. So that's people without any type of disease. Mm-hmm. And the purpose there is to learn about the safety of the medicine and to identify any side effects. And then if the drug or the intervention passes phase 1, it moves on to phase 2. And that's when the drug or the treatment is given to a slightly larger group of people, but this time a group of people with the disease. So in lupus, phase 2 studies are when you would start to see people with lupus getting enrolled. But it's still very small, and that's the purpose is to determine how effective the medicine is and then to further study its safety. And if it passes the effectiveness test and it passes the safety test in phase 2, Then it moves on to phase 3. And that's really the large scale clinical trials. And that's when the new drug or treatment is given to usually thousands of people that have that particular illness. And that's really to confirm how effective it is, to monitor its side effects, and then to compare it with the standard of treatment or similar treatments that are already available. And then the last phase is phase 4. And this is really the phase where how does the medicine work in the real world? You know, if a drug is approved by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, after passing phase 3, then it becomes available to the public. But you can't stop studying the drug there. You still want to make sure you're tracking its safety. And so when in the phase 4 study, the researchers are tracking how the drug is doing, trying to understand its long-term benefits and long-term safety.
Wow. Thank you so much for going through that phase by phase and walking us through that. This is such intense but important work that you're doing. And I'm not sure if we asked you this before, but what was your inspiration for going into clinical research?
You know, I absolutely love to get to be a part of people's lupus journeys. And I strongly believe that one of the keys to advancing health equity is ensuring that people from diverse backgrounds join clinical trials. It's so important that we have people in clinical trials who are representing the people who are most affected by that disease.
Right.
This has been a huge problem in lupus in particular, a disease that disproportionately affects minority populations and disproportionately affects women.
Thank you. I really appreciate you jumping back on. And I think this is one of the biggest phases this is really part of clinical trials that a lot of people are very confused about. And so you did such a great job in really breaking those things down. And to know that it starts from, in healthy people first. I think that's a really important point that a lot of people don't know. And so really appreciate you joining us again. And I hope we get to have you back sometime soon because you've been so great. Thank you for joining us for Spotlight on Research.
Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you. And another big thank you to our guests, Sharifa, Sharice, and Savine. That was all the shizs who helped us consider the ways to support and lessen the cost of lupus.
Yes, and we also want to thank you, our viewers, for joining us. And thank you, of course, to Biogen for allowing us to be with you tonight. If anyone is interested in getting more information about lupus or even information about participating in clinical trials, you can use your camera on your phone and just scan this QR code, or you can type in on your web browser biogentriallink.com. That's BIOGENTRIALLINK.com.
Yes, and if you are interested in a specific lupus clinical study, please take a second to scan any one of these codes that you see here on the screen to learn more. You're going to hold that for a second. One more second while you get your phone out.
Don't worry, if you don't get a chance to scan these codes, we'll share them again at the end of the show and in the chat. We're just so excited to have everyone here. Please join us again, not next week, but the week after next on Tuesday, November 19th, for a new episode of Better Together, sharing our lupus stories, where our topic is all flared up. Prevention is the goal. So we'll be flipping the idea of managing flares and really trying to discuss what I like to discuss with my patients, which is prevention.
That's the hard part, right? That prevention part. I think just we talk about that spoon theory, this idea of like having just enough spoons to get by. I don't know if anybody else out there looked that up, but I'm excited to talk about that next week. But also, if you can't wait 2 weeks to see us again, please join our community. Follow us on Instagram at For Better Together Lupus and on Facebook at Better Together Lupus. We hope you get to join us and connect with us and send some comments and love on there.
Thank you, Chanel. And so now to close our show, as always, let's hear some spoken word from Chanel.
I got my mind on my money. and my lupus on my mind. I find it hard to believe there are people who only see dollar signs and don't see the impact, and why the cost of this illness is so high, the way it weaves its way into every part of my life. That interest rate is hard and a lot to pay, but I make deposits of joy in my account. Add in a trip, a little red wine sip, a laugh with my sis. These are all the ways I keep my storehouse out of the negative. This is how, even though I'm not healthy, I can remain wealthy. That no matter what happens, I can still be me. And that is valuable. That is joy. That is what makes this all worthwhile. Thank you so much for joining us. See you soon.